trustee of Meera Charitable Trust. She has started her journey 32 years ago, working with differently abled children and their families. Her close association with the gifted children made her to realize their innate potential and inherent motivation to learn. Realizing the importance of capacity building in teachers led to focus on teacher training and authoring chapters in a book published by Sage Publishers, Within Walls Without Boundaries, and a book on understanding best inclusive practices in schools by Seva in Action, and a master trainer manual in promoting reading by IBM and on promoting special talent. The Promise Foundation, as a trustee and director of Meera Trust, an initiative Abhividhi, a collaborative ecosystem of schools, work with KFI and Chennai Corporation on developing an universal curriculum for primary to meet the needs of every child in the class, irrespective of difference. All her experiences will give us more knowledge on inclusive education. Let us listen to her. Welcome, madam. A warm welcome from us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry for all the delay.
Oh, not at all.
I think technology is not always dependable. Anyway, Children's Garden is a close which is very close to my heart. School. Yeah. Last week, I was observing a class online, an EVS class online, and the children were supposed to discuss about respecting, I think the topic was respecting and accepting differences. All the children, I'm saying not few, all of them spoke about special needs. And all of them said that they will, how will they help? They will help a visually impaired person cross the road. They will feed them, they'll feed a physically challenged person. They will give them clothes, they will give them money, and they will give them food. You know, it really hit me hard. And I realized with more conviction, the first step towards an inclusive society is to make inclusive education a reality. Unless we work with kids, this is not going to become a reality. Late 80s is when I entered this profession. I entered as an educator for children with special needs. After years of work, I very strongly believe that children who are differently able need either one-to-one instruction or small group instruction, and the person who works with them has to be trained. And they may not benefit from a mainstream education. But however, my director and my mentor, Mrs. Poonam Natarajan, she very strongly believed that it is not only the right of these children to be included, that is also the best environment for them to be in. And so we decided to try inclusion for a few of our kids then. That was in early 90s. Inclusion was a totally new concept for Chennai. You know, schools didn't even know about it. Very few schools came forward to actually try it out. And Children's Garden is one among them. Started inclusion very early. We included a few there. And the children really had to put in a lot of effort, perseverance, and hard work. And they were supported by their families and by professionals. With all the support, they were able to make the journey. But today, almost all the kids who were included at that time, I'm talking about 90s, they're all adults now, are really, they are proud and confident citizens or members of the society. They're working, they have jobs of their own, and some of them are married with families. I would say that they are truly included. That's when I really started believing that mainstream education or inclusive education is really, really beneficial for all students, however different they are. But we believed, but we weren't very clear what the process of inclusion is. We were struggling to understand the process. And then fortunately, we got an opportunity to work with a rural school. It's close to Madurai in Tirumangalam, which had all types of children. Basically, it was first generation learners, children from the neighboring villages, first generation learners, and it also had children from broken homes, destitutes. And they had a small unit which had 21 children with special needs, all types of special needs. There were children with autism, with cerebral palsy, with learning disability, hearing impairment, low vision, a combination of cerebral palsy and low vision. But it was isolated. The mainstream teachers had no connection with this unit. This unit was manned by one person who had done a diploma in special education. So we decided we would try, because the management was very supportive. We said, let's try inclusion there. I worked with the school for 3 years. Every month I would go there and spend 5 days there working with the teachers. And it was a journey which made me understand what is the process need for inclusion and how effective inclusion is. The first barrier when we started the program was making teachers believe that every child can learn. That was a tough barrier. They believe that many children cannot learn because of their damage to their brains. And the second was they believe that only you need to be trained, you must be a
Hello, Miss Dr. Ganpati, please wait a bit. I think the connection seems to have gone.
Oh, okay. I
Just a
can hear
minute.
you.
Can you hear me?
No, she
Yes?
got muted.
Yeah, it's okay now.
It's okay now.
Yeah.
So where did I leave? Okay, so we believe that we did a lot of workshops on the objective of education. Education is not just promoting literacy skills, but it is actually preparing the child for life skills. So we believe we made them realize the importance of progressive and holistic education. And then we also did a lot of work on plasticity of the brain and ability of every child to learn. We discussed with them case studies. We had interactions with children who have gone through the journey. So somewhere along the line, they felt that they could try inclusion, but the management was very, very strong in believing that they have to go ahead. So they volunteered to try it out. And we included these 21 children into classrooms. But we were very careful that the proportion is right. Not more than 2 or 3 children in a class of 30. That too, differential needs. They didn't have the same needs. So that we did, and we started working with them. And the next step was, how do we reach out to all the children in the classroom? We made the teachers realize that they're already reaching out to different abilities in a classroom. No 2 children are alike in a classroom. So they just have to understand the child and extend this ability a little bit more to another child. So what we did was had workshops on teachers to understand the child, the profile of the child and the uniqueness of individual children in her classroom, all the 30 children. So we created rubrics so the teachers could understand who the child is, go beyond the physical stature of the child to who he is, and also understand his learning style. They understood that there are different learning styles in their classroom. Some children are visual learners, some are auditory, some are kinesthetic, some are tactile learners. So immediately we said, okay, now let's make our lessons to reach out to all these learners. So we sort of adapted a lot of variety in their lessons. So each concept was taught through all these sensory modes. So they had visuals which could reach out to many kids, and they visuals which would not only talk about the concept but also the instructions. And they found, and I found, that children with autism and hearing impairment benefited by it. Then they worked on clarity of instruction, and that helped children with visual impairment or low vision. They brought in small things like a book stand and a magnifying glass and increased the contrast and the font size for children with low vision. And they brought in a lot of experiential learning, which is kinesthetic, and that helped children with cognitive difficulties. So over a period of time, teachers realized it is just, if I cater to all the children through different sensory modes, every child will learn. Little bit of demystification happened there. And then we looked into pedagogic strategies. we introduced collaborative learning and the station method, where children learn in small groups in different stations. So each concept would be explored through different modalities. And that was amazing because children started getting together collaboratively and they become responsible for their group members. So we didn't have this peer buddy at all because the whole group of 5 or 6 were responsible for each other's learning. We saw that even during break times, one child was trying to teach another child. And we also made the classrooms very interactive with a lot of materials, display materials which will reinforce what they have learned. And most of it was self-learning materials where the teacher was not needed. Experiments to perform, small text to read, and various objects to explore and learn. So that helped them to reinforce whatever the teacher was teaching, and children started really learning very well. When this was sorted out and teachers started believing that we really have to look at different methods of teaching rather than standardized teaching, it worked a lot. And then behavior issues were there for some children who had sensory issues. One child had a difficulty staying in the assembly because it was too noisy. Then they exempted the child from assembly. We had one child who needed movement. Frequent breaks were given for movement. And also he was told to move within the class behind without disturbing the others. And we found that some children were bothered by heat and texture. So they brought in systems for that to support them. So a lot of support systems came in automatically. And we also had one teacher who will give them one-to-one sessions to reinforce whatever was taught in the classroom. So it really worked beautifully. Then we started realizing that somewhere, when in the middle school, children were not so academically oriented. Primary levels, it was okay because it was foundation concept. In middle schools, it was becoming a bit more abstract with physics, chemistry, and all that. So we brought in the concept of clubs. Every Friday afternoon, there were clubs. And these clubs promoted various skills. In primary, the clubs were just an exposure for the children. They could go through all the clubs. But when they came to middle school, there was a very structured curriculum in middle and high school. And we found the interest and the potential of the child and allowed him to pursue one skill in detail. And children who were not very interested in academics would do more of skill training, social inclusion, and academics were like science and EVS, which is suitable for all children. So it sort of worked beautifully. And I would say that even children with microcephaly, who's supposed to have cognitive difficulties in processing, have passed their 10 and without any support. Because when they wrote their examinations, Madurai government didn't know about special needs. They refused to give them a scribe or any other concessions, time or any other concessions. Without concessions, these children wrote the exam and they passed. And they really evolved into an individual with so much pride. It's very happy to see them. So we realized the process also is not very great. Okay, it is just bringing about subtle changes in pedagogic practices and changing your attitude towards the whole concept of inclusion. And we also, another important thing we learned is that children are naturally inclusive. As adults, I think we are conditioned, but young children are very naturally inclusive. Adults don't interfere there. One of the examples I would like to give is there was a child with a growth hormone defect. She was very short, just few feet tall, and she was in middle school. And one day when I was just standing there, I found in the evening when they were returning home, a few of her peers were carrying her on their hip and talking to her. I felt it's not very respectful. Why should they carry her? So next day I called them and I said, why did you carry her? Maybe she can walk on her own. And unless she really needs help, you need to provide help. But what they told really, made me realize and look at it from a very different perspective. They said, if she's walking, she has to look up to talk to us. And we have to look down to talk to her. And we felt that's not very convenient. So when I carry her, we are eye to eye, we can make eye contact, and talking or conversing with her is a lot more easier. And I thought that was amazing. No adult could think from that perspective. So we found very small instances of children being naturally inclusive. In class 1, a child all the children were supposed to count 5 objects, beads, and keep it aside. This child had a difficulty counting because he didn't have the cardinal value of numbers he hadn't mastered. So he was finding it difficult. Immediately, his peer took a chalk and drew 5 circles on the floor. And then she told him, keep 1 bead in each circle, and when you finish, stop. And he did that, and he had 5 beads in front of him. And it was amazing, how intuitively children know how to support and include other children. So this is something which really made us believe that inclusion is possible if it starts earlier. It's a challenge. It's not easy. I'm not saying inclusion is easy. It's a very tough journey, and it's a very long journey, but we know it's possible. And it's the only logical way, because life is inclusive. Inclusion is the way of life, right? Nature is inclusive. So we have to start earlier. Now, we don't have special colleges. We don't have special workplaces. So once they grow up, they have to go to the mainstream colleges and mainstream workplaces. But they struggle so hard. And other peers also struggle to accept and understand them. But when we started at the school age, it becomes so easy. It's just a continuation. But teachers need a lot of help. The fear, many people say teachers are scared. The fear is because they haven't experienced it. So I feel help and support is necessary, and every school should take baby steps. We're not expecting them to include immediately. At least work towards it. That could be the goal. And you take small steps towards inclusion. And there are many professional and NGOs who have tried and succeeded in inclusion. Maybe they can support the schools. So I always feel that one NGO or one professional supports 3 schools. It's more than enough. All schools can practice inclusion. And support them how? Not by just conducting workshops, by being in classrooms, observing the children, supporting to understand the child, and teaching them methods and strategies to reach out to the child in a classroom effectively. There has to be a lot of hand holding. Otherwise, it's not possible. And it is a change in terms of the perception, the philosophy of the school, and pedagogic practices. It's a lot of change, and change is not easy. It's very difficult. But I think if we really work hard at it, it is possible. And inclusion is not an option. I feel that's the only way of life. We have to, it's the only path we can take if we want an inclusive society. And in today's scenario, I think inclusion is the concept which we have to promote from a very young age, which leads to a more sensitive and empathetic and inclusive society. Thank you. I think I'm done. So I'm open to questions.